Hello, and welcome to our next presentation. This is day 3 of the final day of the symposium. And on behalf of the MIT CDOIQ Virtual Symposium, we would like to thank all our sponsors who have sponsored the symposium this year. Please keep a lookout for a very special survey that we'll be sending out shortly. In the meantime, let me thank our sponsors, Deloitte Informatica, Privacy Analytics, DAWIX, Fusion Alliance, KPMG, Santel Consultants, Tamer, Elation, Ali Data, Big ID, Boomi, Caserta, Citizen, Data Kitchen, Garage, Okira, Palog, Click, ThoughtSpot, Eckerson, Global ID, Snowflake, and Starburst. Please take a chance to go to Content Hub, see what content they have, download that, and if you get a chance, reach out to our partners. Without our partners, we would not be able to hold a symposium. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you in 2021. Hey everyone, and welcome to session 16B, the four C's of effective communication. So I'm going to be doing double duty today. So I'm your producer, and Len, you can go full screen mode on that. I'm your producer, but I'm also moderator of today's session. And I would like to start off with a few introductions. So if you want to go full screen mode. And Len, I think we're seeing your first slide and second slide. So just go into the full screen. I think you've got 2 monitors that goes into, that's it. Perfect, excellent. So again, the 4 C's of effective communication, optimizing business meaning using a enterprise-wide business glossary. So Len, go ahead and go to the second slide because I'd like to introduce our speakers. Our first speaker is Len Silverston, president of Universal Data Models. And as a side note, Santel is now partnering with Len on the Universal Data Models and Universal Business Glossaries, and it's our pleasure to partner with Len. Len is a best-selling author, consultant, and speaker with over 30 years of experience in integrating organizations' informational systems and people, and is well known for his data modeling resource books, volumes 1, 2, and 3, which describe hundreds of reusable data models. Also, Len is known for his universal data models. These reusable models help to develop high quality data models in less time. And of course, we're pleased to announce that Len has now created the Universal Business Glossary as a follow-on to the Universal Data Models. And in part, we'll be talking about these benefits in this webcast and presentation today. Our second speaker is Jeff Giles. Jeff is Santel Consultants Enterprise Architect and has been a longtime enterprise architect and data governance specialist who has been addressing the issues of data governance and data modeling and data governance during these past several years. You are, of course, listening to Robert Lutton, Vice President Santel Consultants, co-chair of the MIT CDOIQ Symposium, and a host of other things. So, Len, if I can ask you to go to the next slide. So before we begin, we wanted to clarify our intentions for this presentation. First, we wanted to make sure that we offered you value in the presentation today. The importance of developing strong, well-defined business terms has never been more important in today's era. And we'd like to provide some guidance on how to provide clear, consistent, concise, and contextual communication that provides business value, hence the 4 C's. Second, our intent is to change and improve how organizations go about creating and improving business glossaries. And third, we're looking for your engagement, both during the webcast and afterwards, and welcome your feedback on our concepts. So Len, if you want to just go to the next slide. This is not the first time we've presented this. Sorry, MIT. We have been talking about this over the past 6 to 9 months. And, we've also talked about, why an organization needs a business glossary now, how you can enhance the communication and productivity with building a solid foundation for a data catalog. If you're interested, you can visit our YouTube channel on YouTube at Santel Consultants. So let's go look at in this presentation, we're going to look at the 4 C's of effective communication. And as with anything, we'd like to start out with our definition of the 4 C's of effective communication. So first, what do we mean by clear? Your definition is brief and to the point and does not include any extraneous information and does not hold any other value. Sorry, let me just read that again. I was jumped down a line there. So what do we mean by clear? You have a definition that distinctly captures the essence and term of the meaning so that it's well understood. What do we mean by concise? Your definition is brief and to the point, and it does not include any extraneous information that does not any value. What do we mean by consistent? You have a standard and a repeatable way of creating and structuring your business term glossary and common vocabulary, and is used in minimizing ambiguity and inconsistencies. And finally, what do we mean by context? Context is everything, and the most important part of all. Context is all about understanding by evaluating the circumstances that surround it, i.e., what are the contexts that surround the term that you're defining. And so with that, Len, I believe we're going to do our first poll. And this is where I'm going to jump to my producer part, and I'm going to launch the first live poll. So in your section under polls, you will have 3 options there. In the poll, you've got, let me read out the poll. In your organization, is there a common vocabulary that follows the 4 C's? Clear, concise, consistent, and understanding context. So hopefully you've all seen that poll, just basically where the Q&A is. So as we do that, let me just give you some feedback, Len, on the terms. Okay, I will give people, and again, I'm just going to make sure that people understand that in the main session where your Q&A is, you will see it's been replaced by polls. It's a live poll. So please go ahead and click on the option below. Hopefully your browser will allow you to see that. And Len, the numbers are jumping about. So let me just give it another second or two. We'll see the kind of situation. I'll read you the terms. Okay, so here is where we're at. In your organization, is there common vocabulary that follows the 4 C's? On almost all business terms, you have 7%. On some terms, you have 55, 57%. And generally not a lot of common vocabulary, 33%. So I've just ended that poll. Thank you very much indeed. And so in today's presentation, we'll be speaking in more detail about the 4 C's of effective communication and how it can be used in creating business terms and business glossaries. We will then quickly review how various technologies can be used to manage these business terms in a business glossary. So Len, let me pass it over to you.
Thank you, Robert. So what I like to do today is share first an overview, a little bit on communications, and then jump into the 4 C's and talk about specific examples in real life about why this makes such a huge difference. And it does, it makes an amazing difference in terms of productivity, service, dollars, and we live in language. Our systems are based in language. As a matter of fact, now with AI and machine learning, the way we define language is multiplying exponentially. So we really need to understand communications in order to be effective in our whole data world. One of the key aspects of this is having a common vocabulary. So on the right, you see a picture of the Tower of Babel, the old story in the Bible about how everybody wanted to build this huge building going up to the creator. And the creator basically said, okay, I'm going to have you speak all different languages. And then the building toppled. That's actually not too far away from what's happening today, that we're speaking all different languages, and many of our systems are having difficulty with it. A lot of our businesses are having difficulty with it. For example, in healthcare, I work with a lot of healthcare companies all over the world, and a number of them have this issue about saying, you know, there's members, there's patients, there's subscribers, there's insured parties, and they're using these terms interchangeably in healthcare systems. So yeah, it's a member, it's a patient, yeah, it's somebody who receives healthcare. Well, The difference in these terms is very, very significant. And if we lose the difference in these terms, which, by the way, some of the clients that I've worked with have lost, and the distinguishment between these terms, like for instance, the member is the person being insured. The patient is the person receiving healthcare. Now, the difference between that is that on the left, on the member, it's financial. On the right side of it, on the patient, it's medical. And then the subscriber, they said, yeah, the subscriber is like a key member. Well, not always. The subscriber doesn't even have to be a member. That's just the person at the company that can subscribe other people to get healthcare benefits. Usually they get insurance also, but they don't have to. And then we say, oh, the insured party, that's the same thing as the member. No, no, no. Insured party could also be an insured organization. So when we confuse these terms, it creates all these data anomalies, all these difficulties in data, and we get the wrong information. And what that leads to, like for instance, in healthcare, is treatment of patients. So we say, oh, here's a member, and or here, okay, let's treat this member. Well, some members are not patients. Some patients are not member. They don't even have healthcare insurance. And when we conflate the financial aspects of things from the medical aspects of things, it affects things. It affects people's health. Like for instance, on the insurance side, all we care about is, did they do the fill of the prescription? On the medical side, we care, hey, you know what? Did they actually take the fill, which is medical part? But a lot of times people only have claims information. So they say, oh, it's the same. So all this stuff creates huge issues. In financial services, there's a big confusion between portfolio and account, where a lot of times these terms are used interchangeably. Say, yeah, it's an account. It's a bunch of different financial investments. And how does this make a difference? It makes a difference in how financial services organizations work with clients to actually understand their investments, to understand their bank statements, to understand everything. And if we confuse and conflate these terms, which many times in systems they are, we end up with confusion and hence not as good a returns. In the manufacturing or distribution world, there's a lot of confusion around products, parts, bill of material, BOM. For instance, is a finished good a product? Is it a part? Is a part an actual product? Will we sell the parts or those products? There's confusion about features or options. Are they the same thing? And these difficulties create huge business issues. So this is how we can help our organizations, because we live in language, literally. So communication. Communicatium or communicatium is the Latin for meaning a making common. When we don't have a language that is common, then our systems interfaces become much more expensive. We're not able to function well. And basically, if there's no common vocabulary, we lose a tremendous amount of productivity. In one client we work with, we had talked about, we did a research study, and we saw that many analysts spent 90% of their time trying to find information about their data. And 90% of the time they were doing this, and a lot of it was due to the idea that things were confused in terms of the exact vocabulary. And it seems like an easy thing to do, but it's not. We also lose service. We're not able to properly provide service to our organizations. A large pharmaceutical company that I work with, where we actually showed $120 million return on investments, was largely due to well defining the ways that we contact patients and members and subscribers and insured parties. And we were able to substantially increase the service by being able to communicate with them and by defining our communication channels. Huge difference, $120 million return on investment. There's a case study on that if anybody wants to see it. We also lose dollars in many different ways. Systems interfaces. If we don't have a common vocabulary, there's so many patches. We lose time in meetings. We lose time in productivity. We lose time and effort all over. So what I like to do is jump into the 4 C's of communication. Robert described it. Is When we define terms, are they clear? Are they concise? Are they consistent? And we have to take and consider the context. So in this talk, I'm going to be referring to three aspects of linguistics. One organization that was in my class hired a linguist, actually, a professional linguist, and there were 6,000 terms. And this is not a bad idea to do. As a matter of fact, it's a great idea to do on Business Glossary. And when you look at it, there's so many branches of linguistics, like meaning, for example, semantics or etymology, or form. There's universal grammar, and language in context, which is pragmatics is one of the disciplines in linguistics. So if we study linguistics, we can help getting back to this idea of being productive, being in service, and having good return on investments. Let's talk about the idea of clear. So in clarity, what is something very, very basic, like a customer or product or a sales? We say, come on, it's a customer. We know what a customer is. And yet this has caused so much confusion. One organization I dealt with, their key chief data steward, basically reported on the number of customers after they saw the definition, and he actually got fired in that organization. And he claims he was fired because he said, hey, we only have this many customers. We only have several thousand. And the organization says, no, 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 we have tens of thousands of customers. And there was a discrepancy. So it turned out to be political, but still it had to deal with this. Hey, let's get on board. So for instance, prospects or prospects customers. Very often when I ask organizations, is that the truth? Half the people say yes, half the people say no. So we need to define, if I have a prospect, if somebody's going to buy tomorrow, are they a customer? Is a party that bought something from us 20 years ago a customer? Let's say they bought a minor product from us 20 years ago. Is a customer a person or organization? A lot of times I'll see a definition of a customer. And we're talking about getting to the essence of what these things are. Very, very important. As I said, especially in machine learning and in AI these days. If we don't get to the essence of what it is, the machines will pick up on our definitions, and there'll be great anomalies and mistakes being made. So for instance, is a customer a person or organization? Let's just take this first part. Is a person a customer or organization? Now, when I see a definition to say a customer is a person or organization that buys from us, there's a big semantic ambiguity there. And the problem is that, first of all, a bot could be a customer. So it's not even a person or organization. But even if we said, is it a person or organization? A person or organization is really this entity that exists, this human being, like I'm a person. And then I could play the role of a customer. I could play the role of a supplier. I could play the role of a partner. I could play the role of employee. I could play the role of many other roles. And when I define a customer as a person, like they're the same, we get all these anomalies. So for instance, in one issue I saw at one company, they looked at 3 different suppliers and they said, oh, okay, I'm going to buy from this supplier. And they didn't realize that the supplier that they missed was one of their best customers. So if we define a customer as a person, it's the same thing as a person, we lose the distinction that the entity, the person, is different than the hat that I'm wearing. And a person or organization could play many hats, especially when we define it, and machine learning and AI is picking it up, we also lose that distinction. So is a customer a buyer, a consumer? Is it the state of a party, of a person or organization? Is a customer some account? Is a customer a role? Is a customer a business partner? What is a customer? Very, very important to define it. By the way, if they bought from another enterprise other than ours, are they a customer? Well, they're the customer of another organization. Is it someone that that not only has purchased, but what if they have been shipped the product or used the product or installed the product or referred the product to someone? Are they a customer? So extremely important to define these basic terms with clarity. Now, another thing we could use in linguistics is this idea of etymology. Etymology is the original meaning of the word. So when we look at customer, we look at the etymology, it means pertaining to the customer customs, a person with one whom has dealings. It's actually referring to a role, to the custom or customs when we're dealing with this type of situation. So we create thousands, we've been doing this for decades, create thousands of definitions, really understanding the essence of what these things are. And by the way, there's many ways to create a definition, but we say, okay, here's one template that we can use, which is a role that is played by a person or organization that has purchased, been shipped, or used products. So what we're doing in this definition is we are clearly distinguishing that a customer is a role. Right up front, the essence of a customer, it's a role. It's something that is played. It's in part that is played. Now, by the way, if you define a customer that a bot can be a customer, you might change this definition. But these definitions are meant to be jump starts and then asking all these additional questions. And then we're also going to bring in tense to say if they've been purchased, and also different types of customers. We're going to bring in that if they've been shipped products, if they've used products from our enterprise, they're also end user customers or ship to customers. These are also customers. So we're getting first at the essence of what this is. And I'm stressing this because I see a lot of definitions online that don't point to the essence of what something is. They'll say, I'm going to share an example later of a protocol being a document. That's not the essence of what a protocol is. It's a method, or a product being a list of things that we offer. It's not a list of things. It's a specific offering. What's the essence of this? And then once we see the essence, we want to be concise with it. If I show you a definition like this of customer, a role played by a customer, a role played by a person or organization that's purchased, been shipped, or used. Prospects are not considered customers. A bot is not considered a customer. And if a bot purchases our product, the customer may be unknown. This is all useful information, but it's not the definition. Now, in our data catalog, we want to record these things. So we want to say, okay, here's the definition, but we could further describe and say, this is all useful information. Most catalogs have a place for a definition and then a description. There also might be rules. We could put these in rules. There also might be places for examples. So we want to parse this out and put it in the place that it belongs. But the definition, we want it to capture the essence and be concise. Very important. Now, what if it's concise but not complete? So for instance, a customer is an individual, was purchased and shipped or used one or more products or services, and that could include internal or external customers. So stakeholders, employees, and other departments may also deem to be customers. So what about an internal customer? Well, instead of putting that in that definition, let's not make the definition long. Let's create another type of customer that's an internal customer. So consider the use of subterms when the definition is long. Now, we have 16 different carefully scripted guidelines on how to do definitions. I mentioned a number of them. Consider tense, consider subterms, don't put policies or procedures or rules into the term. By the way, in another presentation, we list out these 16. If anybody wants to see this 16, just let me know. I'm glad to share that with you as well. But one of them is don't put policies or procedures or rules into the term. So now here's a long definition of a sales order from Wikipedia. And it talks about a sales order being issued by a business or sole trader to a customer for products or services. It's an internal document of the company. Now, this has to do with the definition. But then the stuff over here in blue, a sales order should record the customer's originating purchase order. That's actually a rule. So we want to parse out the rules. Rather than using the customer's purchase order document, an internal sales order form allows the internal audit of completeness. This is actually a policy. And then we go on to consider more rules about the sequential sales order number. And even in the definition, even in the red part of the definition, we're saying that it's an internal document of the company. You know, when you look at the essence of this, first of all, it's not concise. Second of all, it's not even sharing what the essence is. A sales order is an order. Well, what the heck is it? A sales order is a type of order, because there's other types of orders, purchase orders, repair orders. But what it really is it's a commitment. It's a commitment from the enterprise's customer to buy specific goods, features, services. So we're saying, here is the essence of what a sales order is. It's a type of order. And by the way, we also describe the subterm and the superterm. So the essence being clear and then concise. Then we have this idea of being consistent. So on consistency, we want to make sure that these terms are used consistency throughout the whole organization. And here's where, oh my gosh, there's huge benefits. In one organization, a distribution company, we were able to come to a common vocabulary. Now, a lot of this has to do with the talk I gave yesterday about human behavior and how to come together. And I used a term yesterday called data hoursing, as distinguished from data mining. Data mining meaning this data is mine, mine, mine. I see it my way. This is my definition for a part and my definition for a product. This is how our project does it. This is my project, as opposed to data hoursing, where we are working collaboratively. We are using consistent definitions. So a lot of this has to do with human behavior, understanding motivations, understanding trust. The essence of what I talked about yesterday was motivation and trust. And then there's also communication and how to work out conflicts. But how do we create consistent and non-ambiguous? So ambiguity is a big issue in terms of the language that we use. So ambiguity is a phrase, statement, or resolution not explicitly defined, making several interpretations plausible. So ambi comes from the root of to, and it basically implies vagueness. Like, for instance, there's a shark saying, hey, would you like to interact with me? The fish said, your ambiguity deeply concerns me. So what are we really talking about? Now, this cartoon I have seen, this is like Groundhog Day for me, where I see different terms being used ambiguously. In healthcare, I gave the example of, oh, this is the number of patients that we have, but there's different definitions of what actually a patient is. Oh, this is the number of features that we have, but is that feature a product? Well, we sell that feature, so is it a product, or is it a feature, or is it an option, or is it required, or is it standard? And there's all this ambiguity here, which leads to confusion. And this confusion leads to poor customer service, and it leads to not achieving our real purpose. So the idea of having consistent, non-ambiguous definitions is key. So is a customer a buyer, a consumer? Is it the state? Is it an account? A lot of times we use the word account. Oh, this is my account. This is someone's account. And then wait a minute, are you talking about the account that they have in accounting? Are you talking about an account as in this is where all the transactions that they're storing things in, your customer account? In a large organization in Wall Street, an organization that's been around forever, we really needed to make the distinction between a customer and their account. A customer can have many accounts. And this was core and affected, it's like the foundation of the whole organization to get these terms really, really accurate, clear, really concise, and then consistent. So we're all on the same page. By the way, you could have synonyms and you can have different definitions. And this is where we have synonyms and distinctions. And this is where we get into context. And it's the old story about the elephant, where different people are looking at the elephant. And there's an old story about blind people looking at elephant, and the four blind people, one says an elephant is like a rope because he's looking at the tail, and another is looking at the ear. So they're saying an elephant is like a big rubber flap, and another one's looking at the trunk. So he's saying an elephant is like a big rubber hose. And this is the same thing that we do on terms. We look at a customer term, we say, well, customer is this, a product is this, a feature is this, a telecommunications network is this. So does meaning change due to context? Absolutely. What we need to understand is a lot of these terms mean different things. An account means many different things, so we need a prefix on it. Rather than say account, you might say there's a customer account, there's a financial services account, there's an accounting transaction. It means something different in accounting than in the customer area. It might be a general ledger account. In many organizations, like for instance in healthcare, we say, oh, here's a plan. And people are used to using this terminology in healthcare to say, oh, here's a plan. And I can't tell you the number of not only conversations that get distorted, but systems that get distorted, and the AI and algorithms that build upon them that gets distorted. Say, hey, are we talking about the group insurance plan? Are we talking about the plan for the patient to get better? Are we talking about an individual insurance plan? What type are we talking about? The plan to contact the customer? What type of plan are we talking about? But we just throw out these terms sometimes without thinking, hey, what's the context? Now, here's one of the biggest points I'd like to make today. A lot of glossaries, what I've seen is people will use terms and they'll use industry terms and they'll get a data catalog and throw terms in without considering context. A network, is that this picture here of the network of providers? Is it a telecommunications network? A group, is that the network group of the group ID that's on the card? Is that the group that you're categorized into at work? There's different definitions and contexts of group. Is this the insurance provider, the healthcare provider? A protocol, are we talking about a clinical trial protocol? Are we talking about a telecommunications protocol? Taxonomy is key in context. So if you're doing a business glossary without a taxonomy, without a model, without an ontology, that's a big issue. And I've actually seen many organizations do this without a clear ontology, taxonomy, to say, how do we put context around people? So when I'm saying there's a person and then there's the name, this person's name might be different than the patient's name, might be different than the distributor's name, might be different than the name of the traveler. So in our taxonomy, what we're doing is we're categorizing the general constructs about people, about products, about goods, about solutions, about commitments, about agreements. And then we're adding on the industry constructs to say these are roles that are played across industries. By the way, many of the presentations at the conference, our keynote at the beginning, the MasterCard presentation, the presentation from Deutsche Bank, talked about the need to have cross-industry models. So we want to be careful in our taxonomy, not only to look at our own industry, but look across industries, because many industries are needing information. So for instance, in financial services, we also might want to know traveling habits of people, or there might be professional services involved, or in our COVID stuff that's happening today, it's not only about healthcare, it's about travel and mobility and financial considerations and social considerations. We want to be tracking things across industry, which is why you want to have generic terms and industry terms and combine them together by modularizing it. Now, what we do, we have a library of all these terms, and when we find and we go into an industry and we find, oh, here's a better way to structure the generic model, it actually helps all the industries, because all the industries take in the generic constructs. So what we do is we create catalogs. This happens to be in one data cataloging tool, but Irwin's DI tool, where we say, okay, there's financial services definitions, but there's also general business definitions. And we don't define these general business definitions over and over again. We take the financial services and we bring in the general business of accounting, budgeting, and not redefine this for financial services or healthcare or telecom. These get absorbed into the financial services as part of that model. And then we'll define these in context. So when we say a maintenance, we know this is in context of fixed assets. Or when we say something like a communication event, it's not only a good definition, the interchange of information between parties, but it's what are the various relationships. This is the Talon data catalog. So basically this repository, we can store in any catalog. We're not promoting any specific catalog, just showing examples of different data catalogs. When we take the semantic models, we can show, wow, a communication event, it has relationships where it contains things like the date times ended and started, but it has more specific entities like activity requests or emails or fax or meetings. So we could show the context. We could show different parts of the taxonomy that it references. We could even show diagrams showing that, oh, a communication event has these things in it, and these are different types of communication events. So there is a way to relate models to the glossary that is extremely powerful. The key is make it simple. So this is a very, very simple model where somebody could say, oh, an SMS communication, the super type is a communication event. And we've done this with thousands of terms, but this is just one example to show the power of context. Now, you can go out and get these terms from an industry or a dictionary, but here's one of the issues. And a lot of the industry models, they're useful, by the way. I would say go out, use them. But a lot of them, they don't get to these 4 C's sometimes. For instance, here's one from a pharmaceutical industry model or a pharmaceutical industry glossary, where we say, okay, so what's a protocol? A protocol is a document that describes, back to this idea of clarity. A protocol, not really a document. It's the way things are done. Or a document that describes the objectives. Is the protocol of describing the objectives of, or is it the protocol, the way things are done? Really, the protocol is the way things are done. In this definition, it talks about the protocol refers to the protocol and the amendments. Now, take a closer look at that. Are the amendments different than the actual protocol? The amendments is its own entity entirely. What they're also doing is describing protocol, and this happens a lot in industry model. They're saying, here's a protocol, and they're assuming we're talking about a clinical trial protocol. So it's saying, hey, I'm defining a protocol, being the protocol also gives the background and rationale for the trial. Well, wait a minute, what we're defining is a clinical trial protocol. But what we want to do is actually describe a protocol, because even in this, we're going to have other types of protocols. So protocol is the standard course of action that can be accepted. There's all different types of protocol: clinical trial protocol, onboarding, healthcare, telecommunications. So I've just talked about the 4 C's, being clear in terms of the essence of it, being concise, very important, being consistent, common vocabulary, and also considering taxonomy and ontologies to give you context. I want to ask you in a poll, Robert, can we bring up a poll? How many of you would plan on using these 4 C's in your business glossary effort? Yes, no, or I'm not yet involved.
Just launched a poll. So, and again, Len, we have had people asking questions. I will hold them till the end. There have been a couple of people that have also asked for the 16 guidelines. And they've given us the email. We will make sure that later on today, tomorrow, that we will have we will send them out the guidelines of the 16 guidelines for creating definitions.
Great.
And Len, just pretty much the whole result is, will you plan on using the 4 C's in your business glossary effort? You were at 100%, but it's 85% yes, 0% no, and 15% I'm not involved in the business glossary data definition effort yet.
That's fair. That's fair. Wow, 0% no. Okay, way to go, everybody. Thank you. It only makes sense to consider these 4 C's at a very, very deep level. Okay, well, thank you. Well, with that, I'm going to pass it off to Jeff to talk about technology aspects of this.
Okay, thanks, Len. Just give me a minute here, and I'm going to switch my screen over. So hang on one sec here.
And Len, do you want me to maybe read out just one of the questions, or do you want to just, Jeff, while you're just getting set up?
Yeah, why don't we do a question while we're waiting?
Okay, so this one, this was one of the kind of third or fourth one. I thought it was pretty good. I once told IT team that we needed to be more clear in language to business side. They said they don't understand the technical stuff. So how would you best respond? They said they don't need to understand the technical stuff. How best to respond? Oh, let's say
what a great question.
Yeah.
That is a great question. You know, I addressed this yesterday in my session on the human factors and on 4 critical items for CDOs. I get this all the time. As a matter of fact, we talk to data scientists and they say, yeah, we don't need to define what an application is or any of this stuff. What it really boils down to is 2 things: trust and motivation. It's really about human behavior to say, what we really need to do is hone in on what are they interested in and relate this to something that they are interested in. And secondly, we really need to demonstrate the value and build trust. So it's really a human dynamics behavior thing that happens all the time. But that's my short answer to it. I think you guys can see recordings if you didn't see the one yesterday where I actually talk about the human behavior side of this in the session yesterday.
They can do. They can do.
Human behaviors question. Thank you. Good question.
Yeah. So Jeff, up to you. We got kind of a 17 minutes left. So.
All righty. Okay. Well, thanks, Len and Robert. So for this part of going to talk about applying the principles and concepts that Len discussed in his part of the presentation. And I'll be doing it by referencing a category of software that's commonly known as data catalogs. I'm going to be using Irwin's data catalog as an example, but the same ideas can be applied to any number of data cataloging software, such as those provided by the sponsors at this particular event. The important thing to understand here is that a business glossary is not the same as a data dictionary. So sometimes I run into people that say, oh, we have a glossary, and it has all the data specifications for types and lengths and things like that. And that's not really what we're talking about here. We're actually talking about what is the meaning of something. So a data dictionary will tell you where something is and how you store it. But the business glossary talks about things like, what does it mean? So let's take a look at the intersection of what it means to the technology side of things. So as Len mentioned, we have to have some idea of consistent definitions with guidelines, some standards, industry standard definitions, and of course, it's independent of the data catalog tool. So when we talk about building out a business glossary, you don't necessarily have to have technology get started. You could do it with something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet. But software is very good at organizing information and managing change over time and things like that. But what software is not so good at is providing all the content. And that's what consumes most of the time and most of the resources. So this is why we've come up with this idea of a universal business glossary. So developing common vocabulary is a significant investment in time, resources, and then you have to manage the complex interactions between the terms and their meaning. So Len and Sandhill got together and developed this business glossary concept, which is based on the universal data models that are well known by Len, based on the books that he's written. But what this really is it's a jumpstart for developing a business taxonomy with a predefined set of terms. The terms in here can be modified to suit whatever your purposes are. So the idea behind this is that we're not coming up with the be all to end all of all definitions and all taxonomies to fit everybody, because that would just be an impossible thing to do. But what we do is give you sort of a jump start. You know, the hardest thing to do is to start with a blank screen and just start thinking about how you're going to do it. But people generally know what they don't want. They don't always know what they want. So you can look at this and arrange it and customize it to whatever you want. I'm going to be using a subset of the Universal Business Glossary to illustrate some of the concepts and ideas around what Len was talking about. So I'll be using just a small subset as a demonstration for this, but not the entire thing. So the first thing we want to talk about is the big one, the big elephant, which is context, because this is the most important aspect to developing the business glossary. So in order to understand what something means, we have to understand the full context. We can't just say, well, in my world, it means this. We have to look at the much broader ideas, right? So you could have a term that has a broader meaning. You can have a term that actually might have more narrower meanings, as Len talked about things like a customer. Is that a bill to customer? Is that a ship to customer, right? And there's also this idea of the taxonomy. That actually gives you context, because the structure allows you to do a couple of things. One, to find it quicker, so you don't have to go through all the terms, because we've got thousands of terms here. So the context is helped along by the fact that you have a particular taxonomy that will help you locate it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pop out of this presentation. I'm going to jump into some technology and show you how various technologies would implement this idea. So bear with me. And my software application is actually on the other screen. So you'll be looking at my ear for a little. So first thing is.
Yeah, we're seeing your screen, Jeff.
Let's see, am I sharing my screen?
You are indeed. We can see one of the data catalogs that you got up.
Perfect, perfect. So first thing we want to do is take a look at this idea of understanding a certain structure, right? So over here on the left-hand side, this, as Len sort of pointed out, is a general business taxonomy. And we can see here that we have the different categorizations of terms, right? They're not just all dumped at the root level. So then I can look at something like, let's say, people and organization, and say, okay, well, I'm interested in this whole idea of a customer, let's say. So then I can look through here and I can see, okay, I've got organizations and I have parties. And then I can look at a party and I can say, okay, a party actually breaks down into party rating, relationships, et cetera. But there's this thing here called customer role, and that's what I'm currently interested in. So if I select it, you can see how I'm navigating through things here. And I can see that there's this idea of a customer here. So when I look at this and I drill into it, then what I'm really interested in knowing is this customer related to any other concepts? So in software technology, you have the ability to associate things together. So when we look at this, I can say, are there other business terms that this might be related to? So here I'm looking at bill to customer, end user customer, and ship to customer. So when I'm trying to understand what is a customer, I have to take into consideration that there are these different kinds of customers. Sometimes people refer to this as understanding the 360 degree of customer. And it's really just looking at all the different contexts that a customer might have. So this is one of the useful things that you can do with some of this data cataloging software. So let me pop back into my presentation here. All right. And let's take a look at concise for a minute. So jump in and look at the slide deck here. So being concise, okay. So it's common to find that you've got business terms and they've got policies and rules and process embedded in the term. As Len pointed out, this adds unnecessary overhead and ambiguity to things. Now, it's not, let's say, it isn't unheard of to actually find policies and rules inside of terms, but here's the problem with that, is that you can have a term that will have a rule in it that might be associated with other terms. So if the business rule changes, which might happen externally, that is, you know, the rule like GDPR might happen, and you might say, okay, well, this thing is going to fall under the Privacy Act. I don't want to find every single term that might actually need to be referenced as something as being private. I'd rather just say that there's a rule and all these terms fit into that rule. So that's one of the things about separating out your rules from the actual definition. It's what developers commonly refer to as loose coupling. Terms will mean the basic meaning of what it is, but the rule is sort of an action item that guides how you use it, or what are the ideas around how you can access it or use it. So it's better to remove those. So what I'll do now is, again, I'm going to go back into my software here and take a look at looking at this idea of a customer to a business rule. So I can see that there's a data access approval. And I've got a full definition of what that data access approval is in relationship to what a customer is. So I'm now beginning to look at what are the rules around that. And those are illustrated in this particular software over here, where we have business rules and policies. Now, a policy itself is just a general statement of intent. So you may have policies around data governance, you may have policies around privacy, you might have policies around lots of stuff. But the policies themselves don't actually give you the concrete rules around things. It's just an idea about the fact that we need to control data access. The rule itself is actually the implementation around the data access policy that says, these are the things that you need to do. You need to get approval in order to access certain data. So you have policies which relate to rules, rules which relate to terms. All of these things work together to help you build out your business glossary here. So let's take a look at the next section here. And let's talk about consistency for a minute. So consistency actually has two parts. The first part Len alluded to, and that's the idea that there are synonyms. One of the problems that I find with synonyms, especially with technology, this sort of complicates things, because you know that we can relate a term to a term, as I just showed you, the idea that you've got a bill to customer and a ship to customer. But what commonly happens is you relate a term to a synonym of the term. And then that term actually relates back to the originating synonym. So you end up with what's called a synonym ring, which means nobody knows what the preferred term is. It's like a circular pointing squad there. where everything is referring back to something else and nobody actually knows which is the term we're supposed to use. So it's important to understand what the synonyms are so that you can say this is the preferred term. The other thing that you want to be aware of is the consistency in the structure of the text for the definition. So generally, when you're building a definition of something, you want to start with an idea of what's the general classifier of something. Then find out if that something happens to have particular characteristics, not just any characteristics, but characteristics that are unique to that thing that you're trying to describe. And then lastly, the most important thing that everybody leaves out is, what do you use it for? Now, when I say, what do you use it for? I'm not talking about how do you use it, because that's process. That is, in the context of the business, what would this thing actually be used for? Now, structuring your definitions in a certain way helps a lot, because as the machine learning concepts begin to evolve, they look for consistency in readability. So if they can read through a paragraph or a sentence and pick out meaningful parts because they can predict what's going to be in there, then it's more likely that you'll be able to leverage things like machine learning and artificial intelligence later on, because you'll have a consistent structure to your definitions. So let's take a look at that.
Jeff, just while you're doing that, we may run over a minute or two. I know there are questions lining up, so we want to try and get to the questions as well. So
okay, I just have one more, and then I'll hand it back to you, Robert. So let's go back over to our business terms real quick and look for, let's say we'll search on something like, let's say we want to find an order. And I can look at an order. So when I look at an order here in this idea, what is an order? As Len was saying when he was talking about that protocol thing, a lot of times people say, well, an order is a document or a form, but it's not. It's actually an agreement. That agreement is the general classification of what it is. So then it's between parties, and it has a set of specified terms. Now, notice here that I didn't put in the terms are 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, because that would be a business rule. And I'm not really interested in the business rule. I'm just saying that in order for something to be an order, it actually has to have some terms associated with it. And what do we use it for? We use it for selling or purchasing goods and services. So that's the general idea behind this, is that if I use a consistent structure for making this sentence, that makes it highly predictable for anybody to go ahead and understand what does it mean. So if I wanted to look at this in terms of, let's say, a mind map, I can expand this out and show you that this thing called an order is classified as general business under this thing called orders, and orders has basic information, and there's this type called a purchase order and a sales order. And it's also got a higher level concept called an agreement. Agreement would be the broader term. Purchase order and sales order would be the more narrow term. So these are the things that you want to be aware of when you start to build out your business glossary. So one last point, and then I will hand it over to you, Robert. So let me just run this down. Okay. Clear. So the idea about clarity is, how do we reach clarity? So in order to reach clarity, it's really just the application of context first, consistency, which gets you to a certain amount of being concise. So once we remove all of the process information, business rules, we fully understand what its context is, that is broader terms, more narrower terms, various associations to things. And we're consistent in the way that we define something in the text we write, the synonyms and things like that. We reach the clarity part. So at this point, I'm going to hand it back to you, Robert.
Hey, Jeff, that's great. If you can go to, so I think you're up to the next slide. So we'll go back one slide just as an FYI. So my thanks to Len and Jeff. Thank you very much indeed. Hopefully, if we've done our job correctly, our attendees will now have a clear understanding of the 4 C's of effective communication: clear, concise, consistent context. We hope that we have shown you how leveraging content and management and technology is possible to achieve effective communications. So Jeff, go to the next slide. So for our attendees, if anyone's interested, we do offer a 2-day comprehensive business glossary workshop that can be delivered remotely during this pandemic that provides a proven and effective approach to developing a shared, accepted, and useful business glossary. And Jeff, you can go to the next slide. We also provide a jumpstart in the way of a universal business glossary that provides thousands of well-defined business terms and definitions that can greatly reduce the time spent on creating and developing a business glossary. Len has made reference to that. And last slide, Jeff. And then I'll just go. So with that, we'd like to thank everyone's interaction today. Please feel free to reach out to me, Robert Lutton, at the email and the address below. If you're interested in the workshop, the Universal Business Glossary, the Technology and Management Business Glossary, and we've got everyone's email on the Universal Business Glossary. And Len, let me just go with one last question for you. The question is, if we define something and down the line, we realize that we were wrong, incomplete, evolved, biased, etc., how would one adjust this without messing up our analytics?
That's a great question. Quite honestly, I would say it might not be possible. It might be that you've messed up analytics, because I've seen that situation with really, really smart companies. And you can make adjustments, but what I've seen, like for instance, in one company, the way they defined the parts and products, they missed some essential things at the very basis, and it affected their analytics. So what you can do is go back, adjust the analytics, but now it's a matter of socializing this and actually falling on the sword a little bit too, and saying, hey, you know, some of those analytics were off because of this. And that's where I think transparency comes involved also, because some of these changes sometimes will require some transparency. Really great question.
So let me just do this. For those people that, there were a couple of questions that didn't get answered. What I'm just gonna ask you to do is note down my email, and you can go back and replay. Please send us those questions. We'd be delighted to have a chat with you. And on behalf of the MIT CDOIQ Symposium, I'd like to thank Jeff and Len for doing a stellar job of presenting how to manage and create effective business glossaries, and as well as the 4 C's of effective communication. Len, Jeff, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.